Mm. I recall in that transitional phase from Obama supporting liberal to Trump supporting conservative, one of the biggest factors was the liberal political and cultural atmosphere of Vashon Island and Seattle and the Puget Sound was so incapable of honesty. And in that, I figure it's either misconduct or incompetence. Either they were too stupid to know, or they knew and deliberately lied for malicious and tactical purposes. Tactical maliciousness and deception. That they couldn't even acknowledge my schizophrenia after I self inflicted 3 amputations with electricity in a severe schizophrenic episode brought on by marijuana. I assume their motivation is greed for the misconduct category, people who knew and lied. That if they let it get out that marijuana made me electrocute myself, this would hurt marijuana sales, marijuana profits, and marijuana legalization. So I think I went 4 years without seeing a doctor or getting a new prosthetic. I was living on a sailboat and I was taking on those conservative ideologies. And I don't take this thing lightly. I do this stuff seriously. Which means that I got it. Yes. Started solving my own problems instead of relying on others, especially the government. When I was on Vashon, it was like like pulling teeth to get mental help, and so I went to Vashon Youth and Family Services. The counselor there, Greg Thompson, didn't even look up from his desk. Said, "You're fine. Get a job." Supposedly liberal. This is a big criticism they have of conservatives is doing the very thing they did. You know, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, young man. And later on, I filed, all these court things to get access to records. One was my deceased grandmother's medical records. Turned out family history of schizophrenia, which my mother lied to me about. But the other one was my hospital discharge paperwork from Harborview, which is like, I don't know, 5 or 10 miles away from Greg's office there at Baffin Island. There's water that separates it, but it's the same county. And in the age of technology, you can electronically transmit this communication, at the speed of light. Um, that information never reached Greg Thompson's desk because he never bothered to inquire. Even though I had just electrocuted myself for whales and trees, like 7 months, I think, before seeing him. So, the discharge paperwork, they rubber stamped me as bipolar type 2. Somehow Greg didn't even want to know that or just ignored it if he did. I don't know. So I think that the power hierarchy, the hierarchy of power and leadership on Bass Island, is drug dealers have more power than the government. So somebody higher up in the island hierarchy of power, the power structure, told Greg, before I ever set foot in his office, you're not going to diagnose and treat his mental illness. If you don't believe me, you can go to Vashon Island and you can see schizophrenics given not just marijuana, which activates and exacerbates it, but cocaine, alcohol, and more. It's like we're deliberately deprived of treatment because that's like the white liberal, economic cutthroat way prevents us from stability, income, property ownership, etc., from ascending in the power structure. Essentially, it maintains that downward, force maintains the pyramid. You don't want the bottom rising to the top. So, very much like the caste system, ironically enough. Yeah, so when I got to the East Coast, 4 years doing my own repairs on my prosthetics. Well, right now, I'm in North Carolina. I am living with a white conservative who is really dumb, but he's a great guy. This is the first place I've ever lived where the scam lord on Craigslist, as I like to call him, was actually telling the truth that nobody smokes marijuana in the household. That is the first time that has actually happened in 20 years. So, I mean, I remember when I was on Vashon, they stuck in his house and they stuck marijuana smokers on the floor beneath me who brewed their own alcohol. And I was on federal probation that required no alcohol and no marijuana. So even when I quit firsthand, which they really didn't respect that boundary, right? Drug dealers aggressively force drugs on anyone and everyone they can because no successful drug dealer lets moral and ethical boundaries stand in the way of profit. The secondhand marijuana was also setting off my schizophrenia, which led to legal trouble and things like that. So when I got to the East Coast, doing my own repairs, it was great. But right now, my prosthetic broke about 7 months ago. But I don't really need it. I rarely leave this house. I left it once in the last 4 months. Abandoned, isolation, neglected. Abandonment, neglect, and isolation. Because society is full of scumbag assholes. But so I use it for push-ups. I got this app. It's an exercise app, energy and persistence, conquer all things. It's gonna give me an ad. No, yeah, see, so it's basically workout without exercise equipment. So I have a nice weight set, but it takes up so much space that I put it in the shed for now. Plus, I don't have the hook. The threads went out, so I can't, clamp down the hook with the lock and take it on and off. So I do a lot of push-ups. This thing is all I need, really. Technically, a whole new prosthetic would be nice, but the difference between want and need and Americans, not so much. Americans are not big on separating between luxury and necessity. They perceive luxuries as necessities. But to get one of these, I have to get a primary care physician to write me a prescription for a new prosthetics. I've been trying to get an appointment for over a year, and it's not working out. I don't know why. I assume that there's some incompetence in government because of diversity quotas and things like that. Race and gender affect the functionality of government. If I'm wrong, well, prove me wrong. If I want it to happen. But I got switched onto this other insurance without being asked, and they sent me a thing saying I would have personalized care come April 1st. So I'm 2 days before April 1st, yeah, 28th, 27th. Sorry, 2 days before the end of the month, I got a two letters, one saying personalized care April 1st, the other one said actually October 1st. This thing is going out to the point that the bone is starting to come out of the skin. I don't know if you can see there or not. Yeah, that little red spot there. So I got some liquid nail, sending it with silicone, put it in there, which is working, but it's also, I don't think it's soft enough, maybe. It's still getting worse, and it's also causing other complications. I am reading the anatomy coloring book, and that's really helping. I'm doing diet and exercise, which is really helping. I quit playing violin about 5 days ago because the exercises, even though the push-ups, are still affecting my carpal tunnel. Plus, I got the tether string, so I'm doing curls and adduction of the supraspinatus. And I'm kind of split on that. Part of me wants to be Darwinistic about it, sink or swim. The other part of me just wants a stupid fucking prosthetic sleeve. I found a cheap one on Amazon, $168. It's really thin and doesn't have the extra padding in here that I usually require. If any of you watching this, be you atheist, liberal, conservative, Christian, Jew, etc., were legitimate about the values you espouse on the internet, right? If who you are online matched who you were offline, if your words matched your behavior and your actions, you would reach out and help me. You would give me help. Because of this deliberate deprivation of help, this has made me stronger. Adversity breeds resilience. I embrace the Darwinistic attitude. Like Seneca the Older, right? The letters from Seneca the Older. Grateful for hardship because hardship is what gives the male soul the male qualities. Yeah, I got some muscle going on. Anyway, but that's the thing. YouTube is part of the problem. I see it as behavior modification through electronic devices. Apps. Facebook, Snapchat, YouTube, Instagram, you name it. The nephew of Edward Bernays runs Netflix. If you don't know about Edward Bernays, watch The Century of the Self, especially the first episode, Happiness Machines. It's on YouTube. But a good example of this, so when I was on Reddit, and I think it was like 2019, I would argue pro-vax arguments disguised as anti-vax arguments. I would say vaccines are bad because they cause overpopulation. And I had all these atheists calling me a Christian, which is weird because that has nothing to do with Jesus or any of that stuff. The Torah, the Tanakh, the Roman conspiracy known as the New Testament. Only two Reddit users out of over 100 that argued with me were intelligent enough. Only two saw that I was actually admitting that vaccines worked. And that was bad because, vaccines cause pathogens to mutate, and basically the Malthusian theory that humans are like deer. We will always overproduce uh, beyond sustainable resources, and therefore wars, famines, droughts, diseases, these are just things that naturally thin the herd and keep our numbers down. And so an artificial selection replaced natural selection by the benevolent and altruistic plutocracy wanting to elevate the GDP, therefore prolonging unnaturally the average lifespan and interfering with the fertility rate in other ways like welfare. This has led to if you believe in climate change, for example, this is the direct result of overpopulation, right? That more humans means more pollution, means more environmental destruction. So if you're against climate change, you should support COVID, thinning the herd naturally of all of the smokers and diabetics, etc. I mean, I would apply eugenics based on different paradigms, but if those are your, definitional labels of who should and shouldn't be reduced, do you go by income? Do you go by production? Right, who produces the most versus who consumes the most? I mean, this is the problem with socialism: is if production doesn't outweigh consumption, then it's going to collapse inevitably. That's just a reality you cannot contend with. You cannot compromise that reality, no matter how hard you try. And people have been trying for centuries and have succeeded temporarily and then failed in the long run. Hence our current situation. So YouTube is part of, I want to put it metaphorically, one of the heads of the beast of Revelations. Not that I believe in that. But yeah, this is a good example of that, just like Reddit. So when I was on Reddit having fun trolling, which reflected the flaw in democracy that people, are more easily manipulated by emotion than intellect. If you appeal to intellect, it's only going to be successful in a very small percentage of the voting population. If you appeal to emotion, far more effective. People are not rational as a whole. And while I was there, the video of the Ahmaud Arbery death showed up. And it was very strange. It was like they suppressed other videos, but boosted that one, amplified it, elevated it. So they control who sees that. Millions of people saw that video, and it had the sound removed. And I was in college at the time at the Academy of Art University out of San Francisco, and I took classes on video editing, and I knew that the sound had been removed for propaganda purposes. I could tell. And I would comment that, and my comment would get removed. But even with the sound removed, it was clearly not what they meant it out to be. Ahmaud Arbery was surrounded by three men with guns, and he jumped at one, grabbing his gun with the left hand and punching him with the right hand. So Ahmaud Arbery made the first initial act of aggression. Clearly, this was not racism the way they were intending it to be. My comments were removed. I was not allowed to dispute this obvious deception on social media. And then a week later, the George Floyd event happened. And I was studying the anatomy comic book like I am now. I'll grab it here for a second. So, I think this is my second time doing it, maybe the third. But not only do I color it every day, geez, I'm almost done here. How many pages are in this thing? 161? 157, yeah, about 160. 161. Oh, it ends on the womb. Hormonal influences on behavior. Oh, 162 today. I am on, I think, page 101. Yeah, circulation. 102. 102. So the next is the media estimate, walls and coverings of the heart. This is really cool. Side note, side track. I was also trying to learn Hebrew, so I was writing out a list of hardcore Hebrew words every day. But on top of that, I write out by hand all of the text from the book just to make sure it sinks in. A better memorization. That every night I take a screenshot of the face of the actresses and actors as well as the Third Reich. And I label all the facial muscles. Look at which ones are the integration of muscle action, contraction, neutral, and stretched. Right, like when your bicep is contracted, your tricep is stretched, neutral position, and then of course the opposite. This was to better help me figure out if someone was lying to me because of Vashon Island. So many people I trusted as friends ended up being my enemies who were smiling in my face as they stabbed me in the back. So I'm hoping this helps me protect myself, self-preservation. When I saw the George Floyd video, I knew the knee on the neck could not have been the cause of death. The trachea is anterior to the cervical vertebrae, and medial to structures like the levains, levator scapula, trapezius, sternocleidomastoid. It's physically impossible to choke from the back or the side of the neck. It has to be from the front. This is why the IDF, the Serbian police force, and all the state troopers, etc., train with the knee on the back of the neck because it's non-lethal, non-fatal, and is an effective method of restraint against someone physically stronger and more, powerful than you, essentially. The only leap to the conclusion of racism was that Derek Chauvin was white and George Floyd was black. That's it. There was no text message history, no email history, no paper trail, so to speak. So, despite me being the voice of reason in this sea of madness, which is funny because I'm schizophrenic, um, people still rioted. So it's like the riots were specifically orchestrated with social media. The hypocrisy used social media to incite political violence, racial violence, etc. Burn, loot, and murder. There was no, what do you call that, skepticism, critical thinking, no independent thinking skills were applied. It was like you had to sacrifice ration It's come to emotion. And I realized that Facebook, YouTube, etc., can corrupt everyone: doctors, lawyers, cops, military, you name it. Right now, companies like Google, who owns YouTube, as well as Facebook, etc., have more power in the United States than the government, and these are corporations. Corporations have more power than the government because we're capitalists. So, for those who say America was a Christian nation, then you say, well, what happened? How did it become such high rates of STDs and drug overdose deaths? Capitalism. Excuse me. So, this is happening all over again. If you look at the history of the Russian Revolution, the English Revolution, the French Revolution, it's there's a lot of dynamics like Antifa and the Jacobins, for example. Um, People who control the printing press, and then the radio after that, of course. I mean, even before that, religion and politics have always been the most effective methods of manipulating the masses to the goal of the individual. So they use social media to affect the outcome of elections, to incite riots against specific groups, right? So, and this is happening in the Russia-Ukraine war as well. I'll get on 9gag and post pro-Russian stuff because I agree with a lot of Russian policies and disagree with all the corruption in Ukraine that is mirroring the corruption in my country, my government, corrupt at all levels. Law enforcement and military is also corrupt right now. Hence, no arresting of corrupt politicians. Trump, yeah, he's corrupt. I'm not pro-Trump anymore. I mean, they're bullshit. But in Israel, for example. Oh, right, no. First, on 9gag, people that are on the Ukrainian side are allowed to violate the terms of service with impunity. They are allowed to incite violence against Russians and Russia. They are very specifically, very tangibly given this impunity because the what I label as the globalists or the bankers, the people with money, are on one side, and so that side has the power to weaponize social media and its censorship policies and biases. Um, with this process, it's the same thing going on in Israel, which is funny to me because I have this theory that the Jews are not the only ones who play the Game of Thrones. Everybody wants power and money. Jews are very intelligent, so they're good at the Game of Thrones. So right now it's Jews versus Jews in Israel. There's all these, you know, it's on the brink of a civil war, and there's a lot of riots going on, a lot of demonstrations. Netanyahu and Ben Gvir and the Knesset are pausing the judicial reform, which, so on the surface, here's how politicians on the left and the right will mask their intentions with altruism. With marijuana, it was, oh yeah, racist laws, draconian laws, blah, blah, blah. You peel that back, it's, wait, this is going to make us a lot of profit and make the population easier to control, manipulate, and psychologically castrated so they can't even stop us from doing whatever we want, transforming and molding America in whatever direction we see fit. Fuck what the population says. We tell the press what to say, and they program the people. Social media just took that to a whole nother level. Hence, propaganda war is constantly on social media. But I'd like to remain apolitical and unbiased and objective, which means no emotional response to pixels on a screen, etc. But yeah, in Israel, the left, the liberals, are saying that it's all about human rights, right? We want Arabs in Israel, we want Ethiopians in Israel, we want marijuana, homosexuals, blah, blah, blah. No. That you peel off that mask that they're wearing, this mask of altruism, and you see that totalitarian greed behind it. They don't want to lose control. It's all about power and control and wealth. They are willing to destroy Israel before losing control of it because, just from a strategic perspective, the best time for the enemies of Israel to attack Israel is when it's in the state of civil war and upheaval. Yet no Arabs are attacking. Isn't that interesting? Sun Tzu's The Art of War. turn them on themselves. Their chaos is our opportunity, right? It came from Epic Rap Battles of History back when I was lived hard. I used to watch that stuff too. So Israel did the same thing, in my opinion. I could be wrong. It could not be Israel. It could not be Mossad. I assume it's Mossad because Mossad went and did these assassinations as well and bombings. But once you get smartphones behind enemy lines, like in Israel, then you get to incite this cultural revolution, which is the feminist revolution. Oh yeah, it's about women not wearing hijabs and being allowed to be sluts and blah 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 blah. Rabbi Eliezer was right about that. For those who know the Talmud, I don't know it that well, but I at least know what I read on the internet. Anyway, so it's like what's good for the Gentile doesn't seem to be good for the Jew in this sense because Netanyahu's son was like, "Oh, it's the United States who's manipulating and inciting these riots through smartphones, right, through social media." I think the same thing happened in Georgia, right? There was all those riots and stuff. I think the CIA had a lot to do with that. I think they're targeting Hungary for destabilization as well because Viktor Orban didn't go along with the globalist agenda. Just like Malaysia arresting its president when they tried to do the election fraud over there. Not that I care about Trump and Biden election frauding. Like that doesn't mean anything to me anymore because the majority of Americans are dumb. This doesn't mean their heart is in a bad place. Like all those Trump supporters who were arrested in J6, they thought what they were doing was the right thing. And from their perspective, it was. To watch what happened to that QAnon shaman, 11 months in solitary. And then the real footage came out showing that he never broke the law and was compliant with the police, and they just released him. Like, we hope you learned your lesson. What lesson was that? If you comply with the law, the mainstream political establishment is so corrupt it will destroy your life anyway. That truth has no place in the courtroom. It's all about who has more money and who's better at lying. Yeah, so this is how I know that there is an agenda here, and none of you will be like, oh, wait, this poor guy needs help. Let's actually help him. This poor guy needs a new prosthetic sleeve. He used to do all that sailing on YouTube as the amputee. Yeah, I remember him. Let's help him. None of you are going to do that. It makes me want to move to a country like Russia or Iran, but I have a feeling that, whatever you want to call them, NATO, Joe Biden, this globalist agenda that's happening right now, this terraforming of economy and culture, etc., demographics, um, they are targeting anyone who's not in compliance with their agenda for destruction, which means Russia is on the list, and so is Iran. And these would have been my mecca because they at least still enforce the marijuana prohibition laws. In the state that I'm in now, it's illegal, and I do call the cops whenever say I report it, and they do actually show up sometimes, so it does help. But they're the evil, wicked drug dealers that are controlling the government are just doing everything they can to destroy that resistance the same way NATO is destroying Russian resistance, etc. And I think I'd rather remain impartial than, succumb to the scam that I've succumbed to before. Oh, because CNN is lying, Fox News must be telling the truth. Oh, yeah, yeah, because Hillary Clinton is bad. This makes Donald Trump good by default. Oh, because Ukraine is corrupt and Joe Biden and NATO is corrupt. This means Russia is good and Putin is good by default. This yin and yang agonist antagonist relationship is just another psychological manipulation. But it would be nice to just move somewhere. And that's why I really don't want to go to college right now. Is every academic institution I've applied to, despite finishing with a 3.9 GPA and scoring a 300 out of 300 on my placement test for reading. Let me see. So yeah, I was in college at CNM 2 years ago, and one class was a communications course. It was required to get your degree in psychology, and the only focus of that course was to learn Ebonics, so I can coddle the blacks rather than expect them to articulate in multi-syllabic vernacular English. I got dropped from that class for racism. Shh, come here. Make a cameo. Come here. Oh, there's a good boy. What are you doing? Oh, you're shy. You don't want to be on camera? Oh, don't bump your head, silly poo. Anyway, um, and then the one class that didn't draw me, which was Psychology 101, the book we were reading was heavy biased politically. And they had this circle of pro social and anti-social behavior. Anti-social behavior was white pride, right? They showed the tiki torches, which is not what it was made out to be on the media. And the internet is being scrubbed of all the evidence that disproves that lie because the plutocracy controls the internet and uses Google and other social media apps as data choke points. But then there was a climate change denial and anti-government militias. Now, again, if you want climate change to be fixed, you got to depopulate, which means you should have just let COVID and HIV and cancer run rampant. Population reduction. Mm. So clearly, that's not the agenda. If you want to reduce the population, why are we doing migration? GDP. It's about money. Even the climate change thing is corrupted by money. For those true environmentalists who see through the hoax of the people who are profiting monetarily off of their climate change activism, but not actually stopping climate change, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. But then the antisocial or the pro-social circle was Black Lives Matter and never forget, right, the Holocaust, climate change activism, and gun control. Which is weird. If you want to depopulate, you should be against gun control. Survival of the fittest, buddy. But I asked, why is it bad if white people take pride in their own race, but it's good if blacks and Jews do it? And the professor couldn't answer me, honestly. He couldn't answer me at all. He didn't. He just ignored the question, even though I asked it repeatedly. So I stopped reading the material. And for the last 3 weeks, it was the last three modules of the semester, and I still passed. Every module, I've read so much about psychology and neuroscience that I passed every module with 100%. Didn't get one wrong on the tests. And I passed the final with a very high test score. So I had 3.9 GPA. Right now, I'm looking at universities because my theory is that if I could get into a good college that isn't so poisoned the way academia is poisoned with this gender, racial, political biased ideologies and stuff, then I can just get authentic psychology and authentic education and therefore actually create authentic change, not the change that the powerful and wealthy elite want, but change that is objectively good, not objectively useful and exploitable to the elite. I mean, I see what they're doing. They're molding our society and culture with academia as well as social media and marijuana and rap music and all the entertainment industries, Hollywood, etc. But that's one of the theories. Oh well, if I move to Russia or Iran, what if I actually get better quality education because it's not poisoned by American wokeism and this corrupt American agenda? What if then I not only get this career that I desire, thus financial independence and off welfare, but sorry, roommate came in. But then I can get married, get a family, and all the things that I've never been able to achieve in America because of American assholism. That's how easy it was to corrupt America because my biggest adversities are the idiocy and assholeness of other Americans. Americans were so easily corruptible because they are inherently corrupt. This is my theory. Hence, when Donald Trump had the election stolen from him, Ted Cruz was asked to give a an opinion, and he's like, "Wow, that's terrible. The communist China pulled the gay sex scenes from the Freddie Mercury movie, and this is an infringement on our freedom of speech." And I'm like, "What? So you're saying that communist China is more in touch with Christian family values than the Texas conservative right wing GOP? How dare they deprive my children of gay pornography?" But somehow saying, scientifically proven racial differences is hate speech and not free speech, but pornography for children is kosher. Okay. So it just gets a little confusing, is all. The lines tend to blur between right and wrong, good and evil, etc. It's all just power and wealth. And those of us who are good or try to be good are just caught in the middle of this insane struggle right now for power. I don't know. What do you think? Should I try to move to Russia? Start learning Russian online instead of Hebrew? At least they have marijuana legal for now and enforce the laws. Although the evil, wicked globalists are undoubtedly working night and day to change that. Iran, I could convert to Islam. No alcohol, no drugs, no pork, only sex inside marriage. I think it's actually very morally superior to America, which is not hard to do.